Welcome to Mind Pixels. Our topic for the first episode is a simple question. Am I normal? And what actually is normal? It's something you hear all the time. That's not normal, or you're weird. But we're rarely given adequate examples of what is considered normal. I've seen multiple definitions of the word, most equate it to usual or expected, but the best definition I've seen in the context of being normal was submitted to Urban Dictionary in 2004. It says, normal is an idealistic state of being, a tool of conformity. For me, this sums it up perfectly. Normal is a higher standard to which none of us can truly adhere, used mainly to put people down. We can't rationalise it, but our idea of normal begins when we're born. In our early years, we see our own experiences as normal because they're all we know. As we get older, our view of what's normal changes. We learn that it's not normal among our friends to be left-handed, or to listen to classical music instead of pop. When I was the first child in my class whose parents separated, that wasn't normal. As we grow into adults, our idea of normal becomes more complex, as we meet people with different interests and experiences, and we find ourselves further and further removed from that elusive normal. But why do we seek normality? I think seeking acceptance and inclusion is a natural human trait, and for a lot of people, I believe this is magnified by bullying. The basis of bullying, whether at home, at school, or in the workplace, is ridiculing and abusing the victim for their apparent abnormality. In childhood, this teaches us that normal is considered good, while different is bad, and studies show that victims of bullying are more likely to become bullies themselves, with one 2016 study concluding that teenagers who have been subjected to multiple forms of bullying are more than twice as likely as the less bullied to become perpetrators themselves, noting the potential for a vicious cycle whereby bullies create bullies out of those they victimize. Now, a major problem here is equating normal to average, specifically the average known in maths as the mode or the most common. As a quick example, in the group of numbers 15132, the mode is 1 because there are more 1s than any other individual number, and this is how we often see normal, as simply the most common. According to the World Health Organization, there are roughly 105 males born to every 100 females in the world. Does this mean it's normal to be male at birth and abnormal to be female? No, of course not. It's simply more common. And if we could change our interpretation of normal away from average, we might feel more comfortable in ourselves, and see a reduction in abuse based on individuality, such as beliefs, physical appearance, or sexuality. So if normal doesn't mean average, then what does it mean for a person to be normal? Have you ever stood on a bridge or a station platform and imagined throwing yourself off the edge? Or been driving at 80 miles an hour and thought about suddenly swerving your car? Chances are you have, but you may not have told anyone about it. After all, it's just your weird brain being weird, right? It's actually a phenomenon that Edgar Allan Poe named the imp of the perverse, more commonly known as the call of the void, or in French, l'appel du vide. I haven't found any data on how many people experience this temptation to do harm, but it seems to be a high proportion, almost certainly the majority. And yet, were you asked if repeatedly imagining suicide is normal, you'd probably say no. So if you're in the apparent minority that hasn't experienced the call of the void, does that make you abnormal? Or in this case, can we say that everybody and nobody is normal? The concept of normal is an abstract, an ever-changing standard by which humanity measures itself. Simply asking, am I normal, has the potential to lead you into destructive self-analysis and paranoia. And yet, normality is a common subject when we discuss mental health. The Oxford English Dictionary defines normal as of a person, physically and mentally sound, free from any disorder, healthy. So by that definition, the whole idea of mental health perpetuates the idea of normality, simply rebranding the separation of normal and abnormal as healthy and unhealthy. Perhaps this is why I've never felt comfortable with the phrase mental health. Anyone familiar with the diagnosis of mental health disorders will likely have come across the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, known as DSM for short. It's a publication from the American Psychiatric Association, considered by some to be a universal authority on mental health diagnosis, but opposed strongly by others. The latest revision, published in 2013, was met with particular criticism from the British Psychological Society, who responded to an earlier draft of the edition by asserting that sadness and unhappiness, which are deserving of help and intervention, are not best considered illnesses. By regarding them as such, there is a danger of misunderstanding their nature and cause and applying inappropriate medical remedies. The Society recommends a revision of the way mental distress is thought about, starting with the recognition of the overwhelming evidence that it is on a spectrum with normal experience. Even within the medical community, we can see there is inconsistency in what is considered normal, and because of this, it seems reasonable to suggest that everybody experiences a certain level of mental distress in their lives, encountering at least some symptoms of so-called mental disorders. So perhaps these experiences don't really come from a lack of health, they are simply part of the human experience, therefore rendering the Oxford definition as incorrect. So, am I normal? Are you normal? That seems to me to be entirely subjective, and the idea of applying our own version of normal onto others is futile. There isn't one single normal person against whom we can all measure ourselves, so answering the question, am I normal, is impossible. And if we simply consider our own experience to be normal, then no. To everybody else you are not normal. But then, no one else is normal to you, either. If you want to discuss this episode or anything related to the podcast, you can find me on Facebook and Twitter at mindpixelspod, or you can email me on mindpixelspodcast@gmail.com. The show also has a website, mindpixelspodcast.com, where you can find a full transcript of this episode. To keep up with the podcast, please subscribe, and also leave a review, which will help to promote the podcast and spread mental health awareness across the podcast world. Thanks for listening. The music was Perspectives, March of the Mind, and Dance Macabre by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com, licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3 license.